5-minute warm-up using 1-minute intervals. First interval, jumping jacks. While doing the jumping jack, make sure as the arms go overhead that you control the rib cage by keeping the stomachs tight, and try to move the arms into more flexion, meaning over your head or in line with your ears. Next interval, jumping jacks, moving the legs in the sagittal plane or from front to back. Next interval, jumping jacks, or it's just using the legs in the sagittal plane, leg switches with the shoulders in flexion. Keep plantar flexion at the ankle, so you're not touching your heels to the ground. To maintain the arms in flexion, you got to keep the stomach tight, again, so it doesn't move your torso into extension. Next interval, arm swings with extended hips, slightly flexed torso, extended hips, torso slightly flexed, keeping the rib cage down, and arm swings. Go into full extension and full flexion without flexing at the elbows and without elevating the shoulders. As the arms go overhead, you have to contract the abdominals a little tighter to make sure that the torso does not go into extension. Last interval, jumping jacks with the arms in the sagittal plane, so it looks like this. Again, as the arms go overhead, the abdominals need to be tight enough to keep the torso stable, preventing it from going into extension. 3, 2, 1. That completes the 5-minute warm-up. Prone neck rotation. Lie prone with fingers interlocked and forehead resting on hands. Lift head by doing a chin tuck. Rotate to the right. Return head to hands. Chin tuck and rotate left. Quadruped hip and arm swings. This is similar to the bird dog exercise. Start with right elbow extended and shoulder flexed enough that fingers are touching the floor. Extend the opposite leg similarly by extending at the knee and extending at the hip so toes are touching the floor. Feet are dorsiflexed. The movement is to elevate the arm and the opposite leg at the same time, focusing on using the mid-back and posterior hip muscles. Counteract lumbar extension by drawing the abdominal muscles inward to maintain a neutral and stable lumbar spine. Kneeling shoulder flexion to frontal plane adduction. Start in a kneeling position with knees placed wider than hips and arms at your side. Simultaneously flex your shoulders and hips to maximum range of motion. Then swing your arms down into adduction until they reach your side. Maintain extended elbows and maintain a stable lumbar spine and pelvis. Once your arms are at your side, you can return by extending the hips back to the beginning. Proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, diagonal pattern number 1 for the upper body. This is an upper body PNF D1 combined with lower limb movement. Start standing with feet about hip width apart. Flex at the hips and move the arms in spiral diagonal pattern into shoulder external rotation, adduction, and flexion. Then counter that movement by extending the hips while arms move into the pattern of shoulder internal rotation, abduction, and flexion. Move to maximum range of motion while stabilizing spine and pelvis. Proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, diagonal pattern number 2 for the upper body. This is an upper body PNF D2 combined with lower limb movements. Start standing with feet about hip width apart. Flex at the hip, elevating one leg into extension and the other leg remains on the ground. Arms will move in a spiral diagonal pattern of shoulder external rotation, abduction, and flexion. The counter movement is to extend the stable leg hip, bringing the elevated leg back to the floor. Arms will move in a spiral diagonal pattern of shoulder internal rotation, adduction, and extension. Move to maximum range of motion while stabilizing spine and pelvis. Monster climber stretch using bleachers or other elevated surface. Stand with feet shoulder width apart. Flex at hips until hands are resting on the elevated surface. The surface has to be high enough that the athlete can maintain a neutral spine, pelvis, and extended knees. Shift weight forward on arms and elevate one leg into extension to maximize range of motion. Keeping knee extended, drop the leg to the floor while lowering hips towards the floor. Flex opposite hip and knee and dorsiflex ankle, driving opposite knee forward over mid to smaller toes. Drive weight into the bench while lowering hips to maximize range of motion. Power push-ups to shoulder tap. Perform a push-up with maximal concentric action, possibly elevating hands off the floor during the movement. At the top of the push-up, perform a shoulder tap to each shoulder, maximizing stability of the hips and torso. Squat jumps to dive position. Stand with feet shoulder width apart, perform a counter movement and jump as high as possible with shoulders flexed into a diving position. Land in the squat position and immediately repeat. Plank walk towel drag. In a high plank position, place feet on a towel or other slick surface. Walk a distance of 10 yards, maintaining the plank position. Split jump squats. Start in a split stance position, feet placed wider than shoulder width apart. Hips are slightly flexed and ankle is dorsiflexed. With a double arm swing, explosively jump into maximum height. Switch to the opposite stance while airborne, landing in the starting position with the opposite stance leg. Immediately jump to maximum height.